I wrote the book, Why We Hate the Oil Companies, Straight Talk from an Energy Insider, because this nation has for too long not had a sufficiently robust energy strategy to move us clearly into the 21st century, where our competitiveness, our national security, our lifestyles, etc., are all at risk if we don't have ample energy to support what we do in this country well into and through the 21st century. We're living off the legacy of a brilliant energy infrastructure that was built between the 1920s and the 1970s. And we've largely lived off of it for the last 40 years successfully, but now it's old, and now it's in decline. And if we don't get our act together in terms of what sources of energy will guide the nation forward over the next 50 years, we will see our country lose its competitive edge. Lifestyles will be impacted. And in my book, I say that if we stay on our current path, within 10 years, we will face an energy abyss like we've never seen in our history.
Up until the day this occurred, it was the policy of multiple administrations and whole programmatic efforts at the Department of Energy to induce the oil industry to be in the ultra deep. Okay, we as taxpayers were funding that push out into the deep. And so make no mistake, blowouts happen in the oil industry. It's not an infrequent occurrence per se. It's just much easier to deal with on dry land. Okay, and it's much easier to deal with in the shallows. But when you're talking about, for example, the exercise they now have in front of them of, putting a straw down 2 miles to hit something the size of a dinner plate, okay, this is tricky stuff with a young guy working a joystick back in Houston, you probably tried things in your swimming pool or at Six Flags before. Moving things around the water isn't easy. Moving it around the water a mile down and then going into the exercise, this is very tricky, pushing the envelope, engineering for the cure, and it was tricky engineering to get this far. So what's the future of that? It's robust, but not necessarily in our country or in our waters, which is a scary concept to me as a person who's has a conviction for global conservation, because these rigs, we're not killing off the golden goose, we're just scaring them away. And so we were the ones most intent on regulating and evolving the science and technology for the ultra deep. Now you will see those rigs ultimately end up somewhere off the coast of West Africa or Brazil or somewhere else. Those assets will be monetized. The spill rates there have historically been much greater. The accident rates that we don't report on every day there are much greater. They will affect the global ecosystem. And so we've really got to get to the lessons learned phase quickly, because we're not going to erase ultra deep drilling. We're going to need the oil. It's part of our incumbency right now.
The biggest problem that we face, and I write this extensively, is that the politics of energy is destroying our energy system. The politics of energy, where elected officials unwilling to make hard decisions that they would have to present to their constituents, is actually costing their constituents money, real money. And it's going to cost them electrons and liquid fuels in the years to come. And I think the answer to your question is yes. I think this will spook any kind of energy bill that includes any additional drilling in the domestic U.S. offshore, because of the concern that is expressed by many members in terms of what their constituents are thinking. But here's the outcome of that. In 2010, you won't see the gas price move much, because there's plenty of supply in the marketplace. We'll probably be at or about this gas price for most of this year. But those wells that were being shut in by the president in the deep water, a year and a half from now, will result in 100 to 150,000 barrels a day of non-production that was counted on for our domestic marketplace. 3 years out, it's close to 500,000 barrels a day that will not be being produced in this domestic market, unless we revert that decision very quickly and get those rigs back into operation. The consequence, by middle of 2012, with any kind of economic recovery, is the American consumer will see gasoline prices skyrocketing, which will lead to the exact opposite reality that we experience today, and we'll be right back to drill, baby, drill, because millions and millions of people will protest $5 gasoline. and they won't understand why the price has gotten so high.
I think the chronic underestimation of the American people's understanding and perception of the corrosive nature of oil on our economic and geopolitical position is a short-term mistake in this town. And it doesn't belong to any one party. It's the chronic thing that says we can't deal with a price signal because that's just too politically risky. So we will keep having this increasing volatility and endure price premiums like John just talked about that are inevitable in this global supply and demand with all the inevitable consequences of excess debt and borrowing that is necessary to send dollars abroad that inevitably gets in the hands of people that we have to confront. We're going through that cycle with greater volatility and variation and shorter iterations. And at some point, the American people will just say, I've got enough. We're done with the 30-year cycle. We really have to understand, are we going to get a price signal with forethought and planning, or are we going to do it only on the back of reactive pain with other people controlling the high price? That is our choice.